Actually, hold on. Hey, now we have some audio. Sorry about that. I'm Reverend Dave Thompson. I'm glad to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible study. So today we're continuing our conversation in the book of Matthew. And essentially what this is as a civil human minister, I focus on building human peace and common ground. So in that effort, I'm looking at my own spiritual heritage to try to look at the teachings of Jesus and find those teachings that I feel are applicable across the board to all human beings, regardless of our different faiths or our different politics or even our different lifestyles. So that's the way that I'm attempting to go about this particular study. So I'm starting a new series, and this one is about today's Pharisees. We've talked a little bit about what those are and who they were back in Jesus' days, the religious leaders of the day. These are the people who essentially controlled the law and controlled the religion of the Israelites in that day. And they were sort of the arch nemesis of Jesus because they were always trying to attack him. They did not like Jesus. Why is that? Because they stood for credentials, for the system, for organization, for the temple, for a political structure. And Jesus stood for the people. Jesus stood for helping the sick, healing the sick, helping those who were infirmed, basically taking care of the people that these individuals over here refuse to even touch. So they don't like him because Jesus is making them look terrible. Because really, in their day and age, they're doing terrible things. Do we have this going on today? I submit to you that we do. And in fact, what I would like to do today is to read the passage and then go into another read of the passage. But this time I want to put today's terms in it so that you can see how we are similar. So let's go ahead and jump into the passage. I'm pretty excited about this. Let's go ahead and start. It's Matthew chapter 23, verses 1 through 12. Starting with verse 1. Then Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you, observe. And that observe do, but do not according to their works, for they say and do not do. For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all of their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places of the feast, the best seats in the synagogue, greetings in the market, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But you, do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ, and you are all brethren. Do not call on earth your father anyone, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. And do not be called teachers, for one is your teacher, the Christ. But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whoever exalts himself will be abased, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." So, this is one of those times that I really love because in this study, I'm trying to look at a 2,000-year-old document and make it somehow relevant in today's day and age. And this particular verse struck out at me as one that is perhaps the most applicable right now here in our society. And I'd like to read through this translation, but with a little different twist on it for today's audience. Our priests and the pastors today, even politicians, love to consider themselves a standard for our society and for our law. Though they talk about the virtues and good things we all should do, they do not practice what they actually preach. They read from those who have taught us good things, but they themselves do not do them. They require all kinds of money, work, prayer, service, perfect living, but they themselves won't even lift a finger to help people do those things. Instead, they do all of their good deeds to be noticed by people. They dress in designer clothes, drive nice cars, live in nice mansions, get plastic surgery, and have unnatural white teeth. They love the place of honor at social, business, and political events. They love the power over politics that they possess. They adore being recognized in public and being called pastor or father or reverend. They steal people's attention away from what is important, virtuous, and good in order to have them focus on their own greedy selves. If you want our society and ourselves to be great again, we must begin to serve one another. Rather than praising those who brag about themselves, we must begin to praise those who are humble and who humbly give the praise to others. I hope that makes sense. To me, it was a bit shocking because I know so many ministers now who are so public and who are so interconnected with positions of power that they love. And yet, the things that we are supposed to uphold by being virtuous people or people who are good are not being done. And in fact, injustice, anger, pride, jealousy, all the things that we're not supposed to have in society are being encouraged by them. So anyway, let's jump into this verse. I want to walk through it a little bit to give you an idea of what Jesus is actually saying to these Pharisees and how it might actually apply to us today. So first thing that we have is Jesus is in the temple, right? He is in the large religious building in the capital city of Jerusalem on one of the most important holidays of the Jewish calendar every year, even till today. And that's Passover. And hundreds of thousands of people have pilgrimaged to Jerusalem to be there at the temple, to take care of all of their sacrifices and all the religious requirements, again, that Jesus is saying about these Pharisees, all of these heavy burdens of what the things that they have to do to be good people, that the Pharisees, these leaders, are not even doing to help them. So that's what's happening right now. Jesus is sitting in this temple where people have come to do these rituals, but also to hear from different teachers. And Jesus is speaking aloud. And we've, over the last couple of studies, seen how these different leaders, these different sects within the leadership of Israel have attacked Jesus, and how he's basically just, diffused it all. And now he's actually on the attack. He's actually the one going back and rebuking the leadership. And if you can imagine, this is like somebody standing, I'm in the U.S., right, Sacramento. It would be like somebody standing in the U.S. House of Representatives and rebuking people right there. That's how significant it is what Jesus is doing right now. That's how controversial this is. The things he's saying would have been would have been horrific for people to hear, and they would have been so offended. So why are they offended? Who are the Pharisees, first of all? I want to just rehash this to remind ourselves what it is that we're talking about, because we've talked about the Pharisees in the past. You may have heard the term Pharisee used to describe people who are hypocrites, for instance, in modern society. It's a word that's used to speak ill of somebody who's either a jerk or is a hypocrite. And rightfully so, because that's what they were in Jesus' eyes. They were a group of individuals, the word Pharisee meaning separate or set apart. So they were people who set themselves apart from regular society in order to focus on fulfilling all of these religious laws that they were required to. This is what they did full time. Many of them, of course, were fairly wealthy because if they could do this full time. If you weren't wealthy, you couldn't do that full time. You actually had to work. So these are individuals who have the ability to dedicate their whole lives to mastering all of these little minutiae of laws that are required. And so they see themselves as the example of what is good in society. They see themselves as somebody who people can look to see what it looks like to be a perfect person. And so Jesus is going through this list of things that would have been highly controversial and that would have opened people's eyes. Essentially, he's saying these Pharisees are the emperor with no clothes. Because what does he do? He talks about the fact that they have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. It's interesting. So Moses is like the founder of Judaism, essentially. Abraham really is, back before, but Moses gave us all of the laws, essentially, of the Old Testament. This first 3/4 or half of the Bible. And Moses was this important figure. And so the Pharisees have actually placed themselves, Jesus says, not been placed there by others, but have actually placed themselves in the political seat, in a place of power and a place of representing these laws to the people. And which, of course, means that Jesus is inferring that they don't belong there, that just because they put themselves there doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about. He does go as far as to say, they say some good things, and you should do what they say, those good things, but they don't do those good things. In fact, he says they heap these heavy burdens upon people's shoulders, and then says they don't even lift a finger to slightly move the burden for these people who are having to carry this weight. What's Jesus talking about there? So the average person, like you and me, have to work for a living, or have to do what they can to survive. And so on top of all of that, they are attempting to do what is good and to be a good person. And in this society, these Pharisees have set up all of these little tiny rules and laws about what to do in society that most people just don't have the time to do. And it's such a burden for them. If they wanted to be good people or acceptable in polite society, then they would have to carry such a heavy burden. And Jesus's point is, like, you guys have created all these burdens for people, but you don't even do anything to help them do that. Why is that? Because they're spending all of their time getting accolades and being praised by people. They're spending all of their time, as Jesus states, as doing all of these good deeds in front of others. Now, they probably have reasoned this out in their own mind that, people need to know what a good person looks like. We are setting an example for others. But I think rightfully so. The example is not the right example that Jesus is pointing out. We're not supposed to be examples of purity. We're supposed to be examples of compassion, of love, and of generosity. And so Jesus points out that they have wide phylacteries and long tassels, which back in this day, and even in some Orthodox Jewish settings, if you go, for instance, New York has a large population of Orthodox Jewish people, and you'll see that they have a band around their head and a box on the front. And this box is called a phylactery, and inside of it is a scroll that contains all of essentially the most basic laws of Judaism. And so they're supposed to keep it on their head to remind themselves of what the law is and the burden of the law. So Jesus is pointing out that these Pharisees have made like a huge box on their head. It's almost ridiculous, but they do this because they want to demonstrate how sincere they are about the law, even though they're not doing the law itself. The tassels it's a signifying of righteousness and of having wealth, and having these long tassels is essentially a way to say, look how special I am. It's essentially what that is. It's even designer in their day. So then Jesus points out the fact that these people love to be in these places of honor. They love the fact that they go to banquets and they're given special seats. Most of the time, if there was a banquet, whether that's private or public or political, they would set aside seats just for the Pharisees. And they loved it. They got all of this attention, and people just, they were fawning over these Pharisees. They loved the fact that they had the chief seats of the council. Now, this is something that has been a struggle for me lately, especially in our day and age. Many ministers have found themselves loving the seats and chief seats of our politics and of our councils. And that's not to diminish our involvement in politics. As you know, I have set myself apart from that as much as possible. I do not endorse a politician or a person running for public office, because my intent is to serve humanity in general, and to be able to talk about common ground and peace. In order to do that, I can't participate in those things that naturally divide people. So what is Jesus talking about when it comes to the chief seats of the synagogue? Essentially, just like the banquets, just like in the councils, they're essentially their political council. Also, in the churches, they get like the front row seats. Now, I recall going to a massive, like 5,000 member church. And it was a friend was taking me, and then I actually arrived fairly early. I wanted to kind of check it out and see what was going on. And so I'm just one of those people that loves to sit in the front row, only because I get to see things so close up, and it's interesting to me to see how people do church and everything that goes on, and getting, of course, they say close to the spout where the glory comes out, right? So I'm sitting there, and this usher comes up and says to me, I'm sorry, are you a member of the, I don't know, whatever club it was, the donor club? And I had no idea what he was talking about. I'm like, no, I'm just a visitor. I'm coming to sit here. And he's like, I'm so sorry, but you can't sit here. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm sorry. What are these seats for? These seats are reserved for the people who give money to the church over a certain amount of money. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was aghast because, as you know, we just studied Jesus' statement. When you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, but give in secret. These people, however, were giving in public. See, this is the difference that Jesus is talking about. The last part, the fact is that they loved being adored. They loved being seen. They loved being appreciated. And who doesn't? Who doesn't like to be appreciated? I know I certainly do. It makes me feel good when people recognize me in public, or when they give me some honor at a public event. Those things feel good. It's just the way that we're wired. That's not what I think Jesus is talking about. Jesus is talking about that being the thing that they seek after, rather than seeking after the virtues that they're supposed to teach, and that is compassion, seeking after the ways to be compassionate, the ways to be humble, the ways to have mercy on other people, and to teach those practices. And so Jesus sums up this particular sort of rebuke, if you will. He sums it up with two essential teachings. Now, we've already kind of covered these before in Jesus's Sermon on the Mount and then other spaces, but he highlights them more importantly right now. And that are two things. One is, if we want to have a great nation and a great society and be great ourselves, we cannot strive for greatness. We must strive for servanthood. We can't seek to have power over others, but rather to serve and to enable people to have power. The reason for that is, I probably don't have to dig too deep into this, but how many times have you felt great about somebody who has lorded their power over you? And think about another leader or an example of individual who has come to you and asked you what they could do for you. I guarantee that you would much rather hang out with and much rather be a part of the work of the second person who offered their service. And the second thing, and this goes against the very problem that Jesus is talking about with the Pharisees, and I believe the very problem that we're dealing with even today. Those who are exalted should be humbled, and those who are humble should be exalted. What does exalted mean? It means praised, essentially. So what is Jesus saying? If you want to be somebody who is respected by others, you must become humble. And what does humility mean? It means giving other people the credit. When people come to me and this, not that this is happening all the time, right? But they come to me and maybe say, good job, you've done something. And my job in being humble is to point out the people who've helped me to do it, because I have to recognize that I can't do this alone, that I'm not a phenomenal person just by myself. And I do good because other people who are good help me do it. And those are the people that really should be given credit. That's the kind of leadership that we have to praise, that we have to live uplift in our society if we want to have a good and a happy society. Because when we lift up individuals or elect or put people in power who do nothing but brag about themselves and point only to their own accomplishments, then that means that the people who are actually doing the work are not going to feel very appreciated. And they're not going to want to work as hard, which means they're not going to be helping us in society, and society is going to suffer as a result of that. I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm so glad that you have joined me for this. Thank you for your time. Your time is so valuable, and giving me your thought and consideration is such a gift to me. So thank you for that. Please leave comments or suggestions. If you have thoughts about this or you want to make a comment of your own, please leave those comments below the video. Other people need to hear your thoughts because you're the only one who can think the way that you can. I would love it if you would like my Facebook page. If you're on YouTube, you'll see a little red button down here that says subscribe. Please click on that so we can stay connected with one another. And until tomorrow, live at noon, when we go into the second part of our Today's Pharisees series, I want you to know this. I love you. And I do hope you choose to love yourself. It's the only love in this world that we have any control over. And now I would like to invite you, as we go about the rest of our days, to join me as we love those around us the same way. Thank you.